Welcome back to the Capital Confidential podcast from the Times-Union and the Hearst Corporation. I'm Dan Clark, author of the Capital Confidential newsletter. So, we were talking in the last episode about some of what the legislature might consider before the end of this year's session in June. We'll continue that conversation later with Assemblywoman Amy Pollin. But first, we're going to take a step back and talk about the state budget, and more specifically, how it all comes together. With me now is Senator James Skoufis. Thanks for being here.
Great to podcast with you.
Great to podcast with you, too. Great to podcast in general. It's becoming one of my favorite things to do.
I love that it's one of your favorite things.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
Of course, yeah. So you had some pretty explosive remarks on the floor last week with the budget, and I have a feeling that some of the budget grievances that you have would probably align with some of the budget grievances that I have in my role. So take me through kind of this list of what you don't like about the process right now.
Well, not only is it probably aligned with your budget grievances, but more importantly, all due respect, is that the grievances I have fundamentally are shared by the large majority of my colleagues.
Yeah.
And anyone that operates in this place, this bubble here in Albany, knows that I was saying the quiet part out loud last week. It is beyond frustrating. I think any self-respecting lawmaker ought to feel that it's offensive that some unelected, faceless, early 20-something-year-old that was hired 4 months ago by the governor's office has effective veto power over our proposals that are being negotiated. Mm-hmm. Now, that's partly an outcome that's a result of sort of the constitutional imbalance that exists that, you've talked a lot about, a lot of us have talked a lot about up here. That is not new, but it's also structural and has nothing to do with constitutional imbalances. We allow that to happen, that the elected representatives up here, in the majority no less, advance proposals that, as I just said before, some recent college graduate has effective veto power over.
Yeah.
It's outrageous. And look, and that's putting aside, again, the simple fact that we are relegated to offering suggestions as a legislature, given that imbalance I referenced, and the governor has a seemingly endless ability to make demands of us. The idea that the Senate could ever, especially under this construct, could ever declare we are not doing a budget unless we get this, that is a foreign concept.
Oh, yeah. I was thinking when the governor said that, the whole summers are nice here thing too, I was thinking, well, the legislature could, I guess, come back and say the same thing, but it's very different. It's a very different dynamic from your perspective versus the governor's perspective.
It is. And look, that's not to say that the legislature is in need of reform and some sort of introspection here. We have to look in the mirror ourselves and figure out how do we do this better and have this process be more responsive to the membership. But fundamentally, my grievances are trained at the governor's office. Yeah,
I mean, part of what you're talking about is part of the process that I think the public doesn't know about in terms of a lot of the budget is negotiated through staff, and then they come to the conferences or to the governor and say, this is what we decided in this meeting. Do you like this? Do you not like this? And that has a lot of different consequences. Like, as you said, those people have veto power in the room, and it slows things down so much. I don't know necessarily how you do it differently to speed it up, but that's part of what I notice is there's all of these kind of different steps, and I think sometimes it almost becomes a game of telephone of maybe somebody's position wasn't represented the right way, or because there are so many different instances where somebody will tell me, this is our position, but the governor doesn't like it for this reason. And then the governor's office will say, that's not our understanding of their position. And I never know if that's because the staff is. So I think you're exactly right, it's so convoluted at this point. My budget grievances are along the same lines, and also about the, I think it ties into the information part of it. From our perspective as reporters, obviously, we want to know what's going on in the budget. But when we talk to members in the hallway, it's often, we don't know yet, because the staff is working on it.
Just as much as you would like to know what's going on in the budget, so would everybody else,
yes,
including the electeds. And look, I totally understand the suggestion that every member go in and be the one to negotiate their items would lead to intransigence, right? Where, as a member, you feel very strongly about your proposal. You're never going to drop it if it comes to loggerheads in negotiations with the assembly and the governor's office. And so, there does need to be some understanding that that's probably an untenable suggestion as well, that on every single item, the member who's associated with that item is the one to negotiate all the time till the bitter end. There would never be an end in many cases if we travel down that road. However, it does not take a high IQ to understand that the current system is broken and undemocratic and needs to change.
So how do we get on that path, I guess? Does it come down to amending the state constitution somehow? Does it come down to statute, or does it just come down to changing behavior?
I think it's all three. I think, yes, medium term, there does need to be a reevaluation of our constitutional powers. I feel very strongly, and I think Senator Rivera has a constitutional amendment that he's introduced on the subject, the Budget Equity Act. In concept, it's been around for a long time, but there's a larger appetite, given what just happened, to move that forward. But we have other tools at our disposal that can keep an executive in check. Right now, I think the governor is very empowered to do whatever she wants to do because she is not concerned she'll be checked along the way.
Absolutely.
And so now that we're past budget, we should be sending bills to her that we pass now, not in December when she can veto them, the night before Christmas, and reporters like yourself are not on the clock and covering things. Maybe you'll get around to it the following week, and then it's old news by then. And so let's send her bills now while we're in session, when we have the opportunity to override a veto if we desire to. Let's have, quite frankly, the accountability at the agency level that we haven't seen. And look, I'm a part of that as investigations chair, and that's a conversation that I'm having now in earnest with a number of potential partners in the legislature. So, we have oversight and override tools at our disposal. We don't have, 10, 20, 30 different options here to exert our checks and balances. It's a limited number, and we should exercise them.
No, exactly. And for people who don't understand, you all pass bills during session, but you don't have to immediately send them to the governor. They can be sent to the governor at any time throughout the year. And that schedule is actually decided by the governor's office, not by the legislature, because they say, oh, we need time to review all of these things, yada, 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 all of that stuff.
Which is baloney.
Right. And I think what you're talking about is probably what the framers of our statute envisioned in this 10-day limit for the governor when you send bills to force a decision on something, and to actually get things rolling along rather than in December 600 bills pile up and she has to go through all of them at once and come to a decision on all of them.
And let's be clear, if she's waiting until December to call up a bill, chances are she's probably already made the decision and is not going to just start reviewing those bills once they hit her desk.
Right.
There's a reason why she's waiting till December to call up those particular bills, and it's because she's probably going to veto them. Now, look, the statute is clear. The legislature, we control when the bills are sent. The House that passes the bill first technically controls when the legislation is sent to the governor. But in practice, as you mentioned, we have operated sort of within this courtesy structure, whereby as a courtesy, we allow the governor to request which bills get sent to her and when. And that courtesy has been abused, and we should stop offering that courtesy.
Before I let you go, you've introduced a package of bills aimed at, and this is not in response to the budget grievances that we've spoken about, but you've introduced a package of bills on laying out the line of succession for the governor and an inability committee if the governor is unable to act. And that could mean a lot of different things. The governor is medically indisposed. The legislature decides they don't want the governor to be doing that job at the moment. Talk to me about that. I think you told me yesterday that part of it was inspired by law school students.
Yeah, so we've worked for the better part of a year with the State Bar Association and law school students to come up with a number of these bills that are in this package. The timing is coincidental that we're introducing these bills right after the budget and our reaction last week, but we've been working on these bills for many months. And so, look, a lot of this is just sort of obvious cleanup that needs to happen. Indisposed means and unavailable mean very different things today than they did many decades ago before the advent of cell phones and the internet and Zoom. And so the suggestion that the governor is unavailable to do her job because she's gone to New Jersey across the border in the year 2025 is patently absurd. And likewise, we do need to clean up the succession order. If something were to actually happen to the governor, we don't want a legislative leader to, be operating as both the legislative leader as well as the acting executive for months on end. And so I think most of these bills are actually pretty obvious if we were to drill down to the merits. But as you know, as well as anybody up here, nothing is easy. And so we're getting to work on these bills now.
No, nothing is easy. And I don't think all of them are constitutional amendments, but you may correct me. I know that some of them are.
Yes.
That's a long way off. I mean, and not like too long, but you have to get 2 passages and go to the voters. Are these things that you think are no-brainers for your colleagues? It seems like they'd be no-brainers to me, but
I think so. And as you pointed out, it is a mix of bills and constitutional amendments. The bills, obviously, we hope we can act on rather quickly. The constitutional amendments, we're looking at a 3-year process, as you described. And the good news on those particular items is that passing the constitutional amendments this year versus next year is of no consequence because they'll also have to pass in 2027. And so we have some time on the constitutional amendments.
Before I let you go, we're going to be talking about medical aid in dying with Amy Pullen right after this break. Have you decided how you're going to vote on that? I don't know.
The bill's been around for a long time, as you know. I decided late last session to add my name as a co-sponsor. I made that decision after the bill sponsor agreed to add an amendment that came from me in my office that we were keen on seeing included as an additional safeguard. This is a very difficult issue. One of the most difficult I've had to deal with. It's literally a matter of life and death for people. And it's an uncomfortable issue for legislators to make policy around. But look, I've had close family members, most have, where they've had to watch and experience alongside a loved one be in insufferable pain and have a terminal illness and pain medication not ameliorating that awfulness. In some cases, the loved one deteriorates to such a point where they're almost unrecognizable and can't speak. And so I understand that some folks have deep religious objections. I respect those objections, but some people don't have deep religious objections. And for those people who find themselves in these awful situations, I want them to have the option. And so, look, I had some pro-life constituents literally protesting my office yesterday on this issue, and that's their right. But any illusion that this is an easy issue for folks like myself is really unfair. And I hope that we do bring it up this year for a vote.
It's incredibly difficult. I mean, you got religious things, you got moral things, you have medical things. It's a whole big thing. And we're going to learn a lot more about it right after this break.
Schoharie County Sheriff's Office and New York State Police Patrols responded to a motor vehicle crash at the intersection of State Route 30 and State Route 30A in the town of Schoharie.
The limo crash that killed 20 people in upstate New York on October 6, 2018 is one of the deadliest ground transportation disasters in U.S. history.
Things should have never been on the road to begin with.
How the hell did this happen?
The owner of the limousine company was a former FBI informant.
Well, this was certainly one of the most egregious cases of intentional disregard for human life.
It's a story of tragedy and loss, of negligence and consequence. But more than anything else, it's a story of catastrophic failure.
We just want the truth to come out.
If you're enjoying this podcast, take advantage of all the Times Union has to offer and support our efforts to bring you award-winning journalism by becoming a Times Union subscriber today. Go to timesunion.com/subscribe.
Welcome back to the Capital Confidential podcast from the Times Union and the Hearst Corporation. I'm Dan Clark, and with me now is Assemblywoman Amy Pollin. She's the sponsor of what supporters call medical aid in dying, which would allow people with a terminal illness to be prescribed medication that they could then use to end their life before their disease kills them. It's passed the Assembly, but its fate in the Senate is unclear. There are a lot of questions about this bill, so I thought it would be good to chat about it with the sponsor. Assemblywoman, thanks for being here.
Thank you.
So let's start with some definitions first. When we say terminal illness, what are we talking about?
We're talking about defined in the bill as something that a physician would tell a patient that within 6 months you're going to die. And then it would have to be confirmed by another doctor.
So not at the same time, I'm assuming.
No, right.
Like
exactly.
Not two doctors in a room.
No, you have to have two independent doctors, separate times, essentially verifying that you're going to die within 6 months.
When I wrote about this the other day, I got an email from somebody saying, well, there are these chronic diseases like diabetes there are several chronic diseases. And their argument was, well, if you stop treatment for diabetes, it's a terminal disease. So, is that part of it? I would assume no, but I have no idea. I didn't think so.
I think if you stop treatment for a disease and it turns, therefore, into something that is terminal, you could technically be eligible. But you're going to die anyway.
Right.
So why do you need this? That's if you're on dialysis, for example, and you stop treatment, you're going to die before you have a chance to go to two independent doctors and get it verified. Same thing with diabetes. So it's almost a moot point. If you want to die because you have those diseases, you're able to.
Right. And at that point, I think if you have a chronic disease and you stop treatment, you've kind of made that choice for yourself.
You've already made the choice. You don't need, this is only for people who don't have the option, like cancer or ALS. You know you're dying. You know it's going to happen, but you don't have the ability to end it when you want.
Now, what about safeguards, guardrails? The other thing, another person sent me an email saying, well, I'm really concerned that people are going to be coerced into treatment by either their family members or their physician. And I don't know if a doctor would necessarily pressure somebody to do this, but I guess what's there to prevent something from that happening, I guess?
It's also, remember, you have to self-administer. So you yourself have to take that medication. No one can force you. No one can hold it for you. It's your free will to take it or not. And I think that by itself is incredibly powerful because dying is a big decision. It's not a small one. And it's your decision. And there's going to be a lot of factors that are going to go into it. Mostly, you find that people do this when they're in extraordinary pain.
Yeah.
Or they don't want to die alone.
Yeah. There's a story about a woman, her husband, Stacy Gibson, who I think you know, who he didn't have this option, and he ended up just not eating and drinking and dying that way. And ever since I heard that story, I've been very interested in this bill because I just could not imagine going that way.
I think that's very common. When you go into hospice, often at the end, you don't eat or drink on purpose, so you expedite the death because you're in extraordinary pain. Very common.
And the other argument, I guess that goes into the palliative care argument. People say, let's not do this, let's invest in palliative care instead. I don't necessarily see those things as mutually exclusive.
They aren't. I mean, certainly palliative care works for many people, but it doesn't work for all. And what do they do when the medications like morphine and other very powerful drugs are not alleviating the pain?
Right, exactly. What drugs would the doctor prescribe a person for this?
There's though I can't recite the names, but essentially the process is that you take one anti-nausea and self-absorption drug. It's one drug, and you take that about 45 minutes before you take a drug that's going to essentially, put you to sleep, and then over the next hour to 8 hours, your heart stops and you die.
Well, it's difficult for me to think about. My mother-in-law had Alzheimer's, which wouldn't be eligible for this.
Would not be, right.
And watching somebody's life end like that really changes your perspective on death and what it feels like to be with somebody that you're close with while they experience that themselves. Your sister, I believe, passed away in 2015. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
So tell me a little bit about her story. She was in Florida, I think.
No, Georgia, actually.
Georgia.
Atlanta. And she had ovarian cancer. She was diagnosed in 2012 around budget time. Died around this time, budget time. Unfortunately, budget late. She was in remission when I first was working on the bill. So I wasn't even thinking about her as an example or feeling any connection to the bill.
Right.
With Jane. It wasn't until we were working on the bill for a couple of years before we introduced it. So during that time, she was fine. She was diagnosed, but she was treating her, and she was fine. And then, of course, when it came back, the cancer came back. It came back very hard.
Yeah.
And at that point, she went very quickly. She went into hospice very quickly, and at the end, because she was far away, and because we were in the middle of the budget, or just in session generally, I went on the weekend, and the weekend she died on Mother's Day. So the weekend before was the last time I saw her, and because Mother's Day, my mother, even though she was had dementia, so she didn't really know what was going on, but we grew up in New York, so all my other sisters were all here, and so we were all here with her, my mother, and I got the call that she died, and my, I just kept thinking, for my niece to die and my nephew to die on Mother's Day.
Yeah.
Like Jane would never have wanted that for them, and there was one family member, because they used to take turns sleeping with her, and she died in the night. She wanted us to be there. My brother-in-law even said to me, her wish was that you were there. And I just, so it's, it's a memory, a negative memory.
Yeah, it must break your heart.
And when I saw her for the last time, she was in such pain, but she so wanted to be up for the conversation because the morphine just put her out, that she would be talking in 1 minute and then screaming, "When am I going to die already?" the next. And those are the memories that that I have at the end, and it's terrible.
It's the same thing with my mother-in-law. I haven't gotten to that point yet. She died in 22. I haven't gotten to the point yet where I see her as I saw her before the disease took hold.
Right.
And going back to the memory of who that person was as you want to remember them is so difficult, because the emotions of that moment of your sister saying, when am I going to die, is so strong.
Right.
And so many people experience this. It's just sad. You know, at the end of the day, when you think about this bill and everything that surrounds it, it's just sad. Doctors will tell me, I took an oath, a Hippocratic oath, not to do any harm. And they'll argue, well, this is harm. I'm not healing the body. I am letting the body expire, basically. What do you say to that?
Well, I'll say a few things. Firstly, we have the support of MSSNY. So clearly most doctors already support us doing that, MSSNY being the medical society. And the American Medical Association, the AMA, has also come out and said that it is ethically okay to do this. So they themselves, the doctors who've taken this oath and who take it so seriously, have made a decision that this is the ethical, moral thing to help patients.
And do doctors have to do this, or is it?
No, it's completely optional, and they're held with no liability whether they do it or they don't do it.
It was a long debate in the Assembly on this bill, and I think that we touched on most areas that I think people have been concerned about. But tell me what I'm missing. Are we missing anything? Did we not talk about anything?
The only thing I remember being frustrated that I didn't get to talk about, it's a small thing, but it was brought up in codes. And because I'm not on that committee, I didn't chime in on all the questions. One of the questions that I think it was the ranker. I'm not on the committee, so I'm not sure who the ranker is, but I think it was the ranker who brought up that someone who is lost use of their arms and legs, someone who's paraplegic, couldn't self-administer. And so therefore wouldn't be eligible. And actually that's not true, because you can self-administer by using your mouth, because someone can hold it and you could drink from a straw. You can self-administer rectally. You can self-administer in many ways. Technology is genius that paraplegics do lots of things using the blinking of an eye or whatever to have control over language and over technology. And so they can self-administer, and so therefore they can take part in this drug. So that was the only frustration I didn't get to say, because I thought somebody was going to ask and they didn't.
And that's interesting. I never would have thought about that in a million years, about that being a question. Wow. So we'll see where it goes in the Senate. We think it may have the votes to pass, but the time will tell.
I hope so. It was a long time coming and a long time to stand on my feet.
Oh my gosh, yeah. And you introduced the bill in 2016, I think, right? Or 2015?
2015. Right. We actually introduced it in 2015.
So this has been a long journey.
Yes.
All right, well, we'll leave it there. Assemblywoman, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And if you're more interested in some Capitol news, head over to CapitolConfidential.com. That's Capital with an O. Our theme music for now is DM by Easy Hike. We'll see you next time.